Well, hello. Welcome, everybody. We are super excited to have Eytan Buchman here with us, who is an amazing marketer who I get to work with pretty much every week and have done for, I think, about a decade. So, Eytan, welcome to our pretend show.
It's so fun to pretend to be here.
So Eytan is the CMO of Freightos, and I think you have been there, what is it, 12, 13 years? I don't know how many years.
Little 11 years, a
11
long
years,
time, a
a
very
long
long
time.
time.
And prior to that, you were in the IDF in the spokesperson's unit, right? For 5 or 6
Yep.
or some odd
Yeah.
years.
7 years there too. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So you're a pretty loyal guy. I think
Yeah. I think when I find something I like, I stick around.
that's really awesome. And I think because of that, I've gotten to know you really well. We've worked together for the past decade, Kahena working with Freightos. And I think one thing that's really unique about you, I feel like you're the consummate early adopter, right? Like I always see you testing new tools or extensions. And I remember you showing me Alfred on the Mac, and I was like blown away at all the customizations you've done. And I've really seen that pick up with the advent of AI. Like every time I try to show you something, you're like, yeah, you're way behind. Look at this. So I'm curious,
I'll,
where all
I'll
of
tell
that
you,
came
my
from.
IT department, we clamped down a little bit on like security policies. So every time I try to use SSO to sign up for something, I have to get IT approval. And they recently told me that like 25% of the entire company's SSO requests are coming from me. So
I
yes,
believe
you're
that. I believe that. I believe that. So,
validation.
like, where did all this come from, man? Like, you weren't a hacker growing up, were you? Like, were you a computer geek, or like, what? When did this all start?
Great question. Look, I'm like a very, very strong believer in like, mess around with things yourself and figure out how to like do it better. And I think, I think the world breaks up into like the people that build Lego by instructions and people that don't. And I think when you don't follow the instructions, you just try to like do it yourself and figure out how to do it. I think you end up finding like different ways to get it done. And then you start hunting for ways to do it
Right.
more efficiently, and then combine that with like a healthy sense of retail therapy that I have of like when I feel bummed out, you just like want to like do something new. I'll look for something new, and you just like build up this arsenal of stuff that's just like become. I mean, they just like double, triple your efficiency, and it just like you get addicted to that rush of like, oh my god, I can do this faster, 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 faster.
Yeah, and I noticed that you're always toying with. Was it you who showed me Mixmax? I can't remember. I don't know
That's
what
what, yeah,
you're
yeah, I
what
think
you're on
so.
now.
I think so.
So I'm still like several generations of tools back from where you are, I'm sure. But like I find that I used to explore a lot and test new things, but I was getting really distracted on like what my day-to-day job was. So I don't know how you
Mhm.
balance all of that. You mentioned that you use it as therapy when get frustrated. I don't know, like
That's a great question. Look, I think ideally I'm breaking even or a little bit better, right? So I'm wasting a lot of time on it, but it's making me more efficient every single time. I've
right.
been lucky enough, specifically with AI, I just found myself getting very passionate about it last year and really making like an impassioned plea to our CEO about like let's just like accelerate how we do this. And I was lucky enough to be tapped to spearhead AI rollout across the entire company, like finding the right initiatives and getting people trained up for it. And that kind of gave me an excuse to mess around with it a little bit more. Right. So like I managed to fold that into part of my job rather
I
than
didn't
necessarily
realize
just like
that.
having to moonlight as it. But yeah, I think there's a trade-off, right? It's always a trade-off when you go down, combine it with like a healthy sense of ADHD, and then like you end up finding
Yeah.
chasing like yourself down like 6 hour tangents of like trying to build
Right.
something that you don't really need built.
Eh,
Uh, but
exactly.
like
But
long term,
somewhere in there,
it's such a healthy skill. It's such a healthy skill, and I think it became part for a long time. It was part of our interview process. Like, tell me how you do X, Y, or Z in Zapier, and just like look for
right.
that skill of like the people that like impulsively look for new ways to solve stuff.
Oh, okay, so let's talk about that. So how do you, you are very much a practitioner as a marketer, right? You're not just a marketing
Mhm.
leader, which you do a great job in, but you're also a manager. You also have to hire. So like how do you, satisfy that practitioner side of yourself while also trying to be a manager that's not micromanaging or telling everyone how to do their jobs?
Well, so I definitely think that it doesn't. I mean, again, like everything, it comes at a price. But I think the most valuable thing that any manager can do is build up a very, very accurate sense of self and understand what you do well and what you do like don't do well. Like I know I'm great at coming up with processes. I'm god awful at actually sticking to them and making sure that everybody sticks to it. So knowing, and I think you work with some people on the team, so you can see how like exactly where I do this, like knowing how you can compensate for that and hire the right people that really complement your skills. If you feel like you're too rosy eyed and you look at all these different opportunities and you say, yes, let's do that, let's do that, let's do that. find the people that can be more critical and make sure they can push back. And then also make sure that you have buy-in. Like there are some places within the organization where I very, I push the team. I say, look, if we don't have the resources to do this, you tell me what the plan is and I'll execute on it for you, because I know that I have a practitioner itch that I need to do. And if I'm not doing something on their behalf, I'm going to do something that I decide that might end up like stepping on somebody else's toes. So I think building
Right.
up that sense of awareness and not trying to smother your own instincts, but just to go with it and figure out how you can build a situation that enables that has been really, really helpful for me.
I'm sure you're very helpful at, like, I don't know if with your one-on-ones or helping solve people's problems by showing them more efficient ways of doing things or giving them ideas, but they're out there executing. You're not there following up on, you're really creating the process or introducing a tool or how can
Yeah,
AI help?
we're pushing new ideas, and yeah, I think hopefully being good when somebody on the team says, "Hey, we shouldn't do this," being able to like let it go.
Right,
I
right.
hope.
That's a good segue into, I guess, just overall marketing or digital marketing. I mean, I guess it's kind of one and the same at this moment, but um, I've seen you really dive deep into AI, and I feel like you're a step ahead of most folks, even in the high tech world. So I'm just curious what your take is. I know it's kind of a big question, but on the future of marketing in light of everything we're seeing, even in the next year or two, like with what we see now and with the way things are developing, like where are we going as marketing professionals?
Yeah, I have no clue, and I'm terrified. I think that the Henry quote, right, like everything, how did you go broke, right, like gradually and then suddenly, and I think that's what's going to happen across every domain, right? There's going to be these slow changes and these really big changes, and it doesn't. I mean, there's still going to be this is going to impact different parts of the industry at varying paces as well. Like you're still going to have
Right.
somebody sitting in their office using PowerPoint without AI putting together Marcom material 5 years from now for like some industrial application. Like it's not going to change everything, but the people that will lean into it are going to be using a MacBook Pro while their competitors are using a typewriter, and you know how that's going to play out.
Right.
I definitely think that it puts more. Hey, I think every single person needs to understand what are the tools that are out there, and you don't need to use them all. But if I speak to somebody and they didn't run some through ChatGPT, it's like a red flag. Like it's not an
Really?
embarrassing thing to do. Yeah, I mean, like I
What do
think
you
for
mean
me,
run
like
it through? Just so I understand
my like oh shit moment, I think was a couple of months ago, or maybe a little bit longer. I took all of my blog posts that I'd written and I threw it at Claude. I think this was when 3.5 first came out, and I said, hey, write my like brand tone style guide. And then I spent only like 3 or 4 minutes like iterating on it. And then I took that same exact style guide and I said, rewrite the American Declaration of Independence in my voice. And it was scary, like with literally 5 minutes of work. And it was able to replicate, it's not me, but it's like 80% of me. And then there's small tweaks there. And that would have taken me 2 hours to do. And if you're not taking something small like that, like when you have any output that you need to be doing,
any
thinking about
creative or marketing copy, anything.
any creative, go back. Yeah, I mean, like I trust people enough to be able to throw together like copy for a button. But if you're working on something new, I've been thinking more like figure out what are the atomic elements that you're going to use that your brain is already like banking on, right? You're going to be using your brand guide, you're going to be using your company directory testimonials that you have, and some type of like go to market document that you have about the new product. Take all those, throw those into that same like into ChatGPT or into Sonnet or whatever it is, and say, hey, what does my landing page look like? And just like use that as a starting point and go back and forth and collaborate with it.
So really about thought partnership and brainstorming of sort of an omniscient, all-knowing brand and AI that knows you better
Yeah,
than.
yeah. And the scary part is like I am sure I imagine that most of my competitors will be doing the same thing.
Right.
Right? That like the bar of how do you compete as a technical product? I think SaaS companies in general are in trouble because I literally had an experiment today. I was messing around with Cursor trying to deploy a to-do app, and it's not perfect. I don't, but like I was able to build a to-do app with
Right.
login, user authentication management, deploy to a website with like half the features that I use from Todoist, and I was able to do that during 2 boring meetings that I was half listening in. Right. And like that's scary. And that means that most SaaS companies I'm paying Todoist, whatever, $30 a year, and I like them. But like eventually it's gonna be even easier for me to do it. And then what's the moat?
Right.
And
Or there's
I
just such increased competition of these sort of basic apps that
yes.
that the
Yes.
cost of
So
entry is.
exactly. So
Right.
then what's the moat? The moat is going to be brand or network, right? It's not about can you build the tool, it's about can you connect the right amount of people, or are you able to create the brand? And when everybody's using AI augmentation to get better at building a brand, we need to get really, really good at building your brand. And it's just
Right.
like the bar is going to keep on going up and up and up. And yeah, it's scary.
It's very scary. So, what does a marketer's role then look like? I mean, does everybody just become really good prompt engineers, and you need less creative chops, or are folks needing to sort of wear multiple hats, and so you just have more AI and less human, hours, at least for certain applications? Like, obviously, I know that we're not all can tell the future, but like I'm just trying to see where this lands, because what I'm hearing is you may not need as many humans on a marketing team to do all of this. You may just need a couple of people that are really good at knowing the AI tools and what's out there, and leveraging what we all agree is our brand voice and what the creative vision is, and then executing. I don't know.
Yeah, so specifically in terms of prompt engineering, I was a very, very big advocate initially, and over time, I think it's gotten easier, right? The smarter the models get, the less sophisticated your prompts need to be. I do think that there's like there's basic elements around structure, like what is your objective, what is the desired format, what is the important context that you have, what are the guardrails that you're putting in place. Like there's a couple of things that you always should have. I've been a bigger advocate of really making sure that you catalog your different types of inputs, right? And you really have the right resources at your disposal to decide when do I throw what at which AI model. And being
Right.
able to do that quickly, I think really turbocharges stuff and is more important than the prompt engineering side. This is overly
Meaning which model
optimistic.
or which tool does what best is what you're saying.
Which tool exactly? And what do I need to give the model in order to do it correctly?
And your point about making sure we know what the objective is and what the expected output is the same advice you'd give a manager who's who is delegating something internally, right? This isn't necessarily just simple for AI. You have a coworker now. You have an AI coworker who you're delegating to that just can do it probably faster and better.
To your point, like I've been very explicit, like my settings and customization for my ChatGPT says if I give you a prompt that is sophisticated but doesn't have the right objective, ask me it before you start executing. Like I've like been very explicit with it about like push back against me if you feel like help me be better at managing you basically. And it usually
LLMs are very, very, complimentary. They want to satisfy you. They want to give you an answer no matter what. And so it's not trained to second guess your prompt or your question. That's really interesting.
But just to your point, just before we go on from there, like in terms of like what the marketing team of the future look like, I think you still need all these different functions. Instead of a video editor, you'll have the person who's managing an AI tool that creates videos.
That isn't a video editor.
Right. I think hopefully there still is a place for all the different marketing professions. I think a lot of them will adapt a little bit, but it does mean that a team should be able to theoretically deliver much more with far less resources.
Wow. Okay. I feel like every day, for me, it's been since about October or November, but every day forward, I feel like my mind starts melting a little bit, like the emoji. Like I just thinking about how to build a team of the future, like what services are still relevant. I obviously think about our own world of search. That's a whole other conversation. But I know that you recently did a talk, and we talked, on Slack a bit about SEO and PR and what the connection is. So in short, the LLMs are going to be probably a primary source for search information. And even if not, I think Google will still be a major player, but the SERP will be probably AI first or LLM sort of chat first experience like Gemini is. So expecting that to happen, the result sets are no longer, hey, come click out to this website. I'm going to provide you a summary. I'm going to read these websites that would have ranked otherwise and give you a summary. And obviously, depending on the query, but still, we're seeing a lot more happen in that chat experience and less clickouts. And so what matters is, I guess, your brand mentions what's written about you or how you write about yourself, but not necessarily on your own website, but on others. I know you're really into PR. You've done amazing work. I know you've gotten mentions and links from the White House and all sorts of places. How are you seeing this world? I know that, you may not be monitoring search results every day, but you've done a lot of checking and looking about how Freightos is.
Fortunately, I think I am, just because original about it, but so let me answer this on two levels, on like the theoretical level and the more technical level. On the theoretical level, the way that I kind of articulated it is, I think as a marketer, you have to look at the world in the shape of gatekeepers. Who is aggregating demand anywhere, right? So Google is aggregating search demand for now. The media historically aggregated, right, the demand by curating all this information. And what an editor's job was to do is to say, hey, this is what's relevant for my users. And like, that's why the person who's reading the Wall Street Journal has the confidence that I'm getting everything I need to know because I'm reading the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Or I'm reading TechCrunch and I know everything I need to know about tech. And then when you think about who those gatekeepers are right now and how that's evolving, traditional media, I think, has lost a lot of its gatekeeping status. If you imagine yourself getting on like a subway in New York City, of the 200 people on a subway, like 4 or 5 of them have seen CNN. Dozens of them have listened to Joe Rogan, just like from pure statistics, right? So it's a
Right.
different where that like concentration of demand is going is changing. And I don't think it's changed so much for Google, incidentally. I think like we're still, and it's gonna take a long time to change that habit. People are still going to Google and more people are going to ChatGPT, and we see
Yes.
it in the numbers too. But that's the gatekeepers are changing. And then you have to figure out what do those gatekeepers want and what can those gatekeepers deliver to me. And that's where it starts to get a little bit more tactical. In my mind, I think part of SEO is basically bifurcating into the PRS type of visibility and the conversion S type of visibility. Or ChatGPT is PR. It's not conversion. It's much less like by intent, right? You're like ChatGPT is sucking
Right.
up your content and providing answers, and that's what PR is. It's just like now you have infinity reporters, infinitely personalized. So you'll have more long tail queries, and you'll have more companies that are looking for data, and you have to decide as a brand how important is that to me to rank inside of ChatGPT because you're giving away something for free in order to get there. And then it's going to
Yeah.
be a leaky funnel, right? It's going to be a very leaky funnel. The conversion from ChatGPT to click through, it'll happen. I think especially more for like buy intent queries, but I anticipate the click through rate will be even lower than on Google right now.
Right, right.
Um,
And attribution is going to be a hot mess. What's really interesting, Will Reynolds was speaking about this, from Seer Interactive. Yeah, like it's right now, what we're seeing in the engines is that like sort of sketchy source citation is what's happening. So like looking at, listicle articles that are obviously affiliate pages and so on. And obviously it depends on every industry, but like it doesn't matter that he has been talking and Seer has been talking about the intersection of SEO and PPC and AI for years and does all this content and it gets all this engagement on social and gets mentioned by industry magazines. What ChatGPT is sourcing for a given query of like, hey, what are the best agencies for the intersection of SEO and PPC was if you actually source and reverse engineer it, it's like kind of crappy listicle articles. I'm sure this will get better, just like Google got better, right?
and
But the question remains.
Google got worse, right? Like I think there's just like
Yes.
there's just massive. I don't know when you buy something new, like how do you decide what to buy? What's your? I think for me, most of my friends, I'll go to Wirecutter, right? I don't try like I'm not gonna Google like what's the best whatever humidifier.
Even if they're affiliates.
Yeah, it's just like PE firms that have snapped up large old
Yeah.
publications and are building backlinks with massive domain authority.
Right.
Nobody Google
No.
any
Right.
right? And the
Right.
same thing with
Right.
there. Nobody trusts unless you're like bought into that specific publication. So and I think right now it almost feels like ChatGPT has earned our trust more than some public.
And that's the emotional side of it, right? That's the psychological, like there's not a lot of ads there. It feels like your friend who's giving you advice, like you would turn to a real human and say, hey, what have you experienced? Like we inherently trust human, and it's a lot more of a human voice than Google's mess of ads and listings right now. But when you look under the hood, at least for the next couple of years, my concern is that we're going to become much more have to become more spammy as tacticians. I hope not. And that's what Will talks about, because this is where the results are at now. So does that mean I need to go there to compete? I don't want to.
Well, I would say like Perplexity, take like a Perplexity or something. I think Perplexity is putting a higher bar for what they source from, right? That's what how they're positioning themselves. All these like the state of deep research, right? I'm sure that part of the chain of deep research queries that are coming in is, can I trust this and what type of domain expertise? And I think ChatGPT almost similarly probably to Google, like they don't want to put a stamp of authority and say, hey, you can trust this site. That's something that nobody really wants to do. So instead you rely on algorithms. But I think it's a driving factor for if you look at the number of media publications that OpenAI is licensing information from.
Right.
It's a massive link. It's like
yes,
the largest publications in the world are selling data. Times. Exactly. And they're doing that because that lets them say, hey, this company or this publication puts a stamp for approval on it. And I think that's the driving, I have to assume that's one of the motivating forces behind it. It's like you need that credibility to come from somewhere.
Absolutely.
And I think it'll be hard for demand gen. It'll be hard for SEO.
Yeah.
But I think now the question is really going to be, how do you build up that authority and how do you build up that sense of credibility? And that's why I've always been, I've been a huge fan of data marketing, and I think that data is just by far one of the best ways to build up that credibility.
Okay, so let's talk about that because you've succeeded in getting some into some major publications. Now that sort of anyone can build content, what are the differentiating factors? Or I guess everybody can build tools if they know how. I think that people will take some time. We talked about Cursor. Can you just take us through what you've been doing and, something that may have taken months and dev time now can be really fast? Like, how are you looking at differentiation, I guess, from an asset perspective?
So I think the first thing in terms of expertise, one of like the hard, humble pie learnings from the early days of Freightos is you can't go to the industry and say, hey, you're doing it all wrong. You need to find, right, especially in B2B, because you're selling to people that forget more in a week than you'll ever learn about your given space.
Right.
So a big learning for us initially was, hey, instead of trying to educate them or trying to steer the market, get the people that you're marketing to help educate their colleagues and just like ride the coattails of education. So we had a big, and we still do this muscle of surveys and interviews and putting together information, collecting raw data about what's happening within the industry. And that became a big part of our content. It became a big part of our PR and of our demand gen, to the point where we ended up playbooking and then productizing a data platform. And then now that does seven figures of revenue.
Unbelievable.
But like, I mean, I think it's like fairly unique, and it had to do with the fact that logistics in some cases was like a relatively slow adopter. But now you have to think, okay, I have all this data. How am I making sure that I can keep eyes on my property? How can I build up my earned audience? Like, we're in land grab territory right now. The next year or two,
Right.
before SEO goes away, you need to turn every single person that's coming to your website into an owned audience. Like, this is land grab time. But this is like, you need the channel to still work until they stop working. You got to go after these eyeballs. And to get those eyeballs and to get the emails and to make sure that you can educate people, you need to have a really high bar of content. And that means really making sure that you can lean into things like data if it's required, or free tooling if it's what really helps you.
Right.
And then just build up that trust with your users. I mean, this is just like small. I think, again, this is still like really early days, but one example of an experiment like that is we're publishing a white paper that we run every single year. And this time, unlike what we've done in the past, besides the report that we compiled, we ran 5 or 6 interviews with other industry practitioners, like senior executives, and we compiled a longer list of different data points that kind of didn't make the cut to get it into the actual report. And we created like a small front end. I created this like small front end tool using Cursor that sends a query out to an OpenAI assistant that basically says like, hey, customize this report. And the front end says like, choose, are you a large company or a small company? Are you interested in online sales or in customer service? And what type of report are you looking for? And then it'll take all that information that we have in the back end, customize it and serve it. And it's an experiment. It might probably will flop. But I think coming up with like, how do you serve that information and insights in a way that keeps people sticky and keeps people coming back? That's more important than ever. And that's not something that ChatGPT will be able to replicate yet.
Right.
Even though, ironically, I'm using ChatGPT on the back end to do that exact same thing.
Right, but compiling it all together is not necessarily something you could do yet. That's really cool. And I will say, I don't know if this is still as relevant, but just the creating these micro tools, I know it's been extremely successful for Freightos, and it just was a snowball, right? And one of the limiting factors historically is like, well, okay, that's going to require dev time. That's going to require some compiling. So I would just say anybody can go and create a simple web tool now. You don't need to be a developer. I mean, yes, you need to work with your devs and figure out what language and so on. But I think that's just, at least in the next couple of years, we have the technology and the simplicity to do no code basic applications with AI, and you can still help you rank and gain users before there's this massive shift. I think that's what we're saying here. I know you have a hard stop. I guess my last question here is about website traffic and just websites in general. Given everything that we've talked about and more, what is the future of the website, right? Like, are we not going to just simply be getting our information from our AI assistants in the near future? Like, is the website really just a brochure for some social proof or just to do that last phase of the funnel? Or is there something that maybe we can gatekeep that can only exist on our site? And does that even make sense? Why would we try to block bots? So yeah, this is something I've been thinking about. I know there's no simple answer. I was curious your thoughts.
Wow. I feel like these are like the types of questions that like marketers ask each other when they're high. I don't know. Like, I don't know. What's like, right. I don't know. It's sort of like, I don't know. It's a crazy question. It's probably, we're still using business cards, right? So there's definitely like a shelf life for these things that are not going to go away. And you'll need your digital property. Calling card there as like, this is my property and this is what I use. I believe that that we're going to end up needing to build for the audience of ChatGPT consumers and the audience of
Right.
humans. And those are not going to be the same. And you might like this is the way that I'm structuring something like the atomic elements that I use for prompts. I have like these what I've called like swipe files of just like files on my desktop of like, here's about Freightos, here's our brand voice, here's our personas, and I just drag them in. But they're structured in XML files. Like they're not written for humans. They're written
Oh,
to make it really
interesting.
easy for an AI to parse it correctly. So like I have like a swipe file with testimonials, which is like XML layer one of product, XML layer two of quote, and then a sub one of like who said that and their company and type. And that's written for AI. It's not written for a human, but I can drag it into an AI and give it, let it output things. So yeah, I think that probably will end up having like a whole other like
Right.
markup schema on our websites.
Eytan, I know you have to jump. I really appreciate this conversation. At times, it did feel like we're two marketers that are stoned thinking about the future, but this is this is really right here at the same time. I think as early adopters, we see this stuff coming, and just how good the LLMs have gotten. It's scary, and that's what makes me realize, oh shit, consumers, B2B, B2C are going to be moving to this as a primary means of information retrieval.
I agree.
Um,
And just daily, just like just sound like stay like literally
yes,
ear to I keep on learning. There's so much to learn.
100%, 100%. I really appreciate your time and speak soon.
Sorry, fun
Thanks,
conversation.
Eytan.
Amazing.